And welcome to Time to Awaken. This is Michael, and I believe this is January 25th of 2024. Um, I am here today to do another video, obviously. This one is going to be, well, relatively short, depending upon how quickly I can pull through. Okay. Below you will find a link to my wiki. You can download that if you'd like and take a look. It is something that I put together about a year ago, give or take, and it has all of my videos in a Word format, as well as documents that I've created about this time period, etc. Bible verses specifically with notes in them, etc., etc. Okay, so it's out there. It's you can download along with a few other um, documents that I've put up there for people to have and take a look at. Below, you will also find a YouTube link and a Rumble link, obviously, right here and here. And here we have Mark of the Beast videos, both YouTube and Rumble as well. Here is my email address, right here, time to awaken at 717 at gmail.com. Okay? All right, so this video, it comes from, um, how shall we say this? It's a set of prophecies that I found, wow, 4 or 5 years ago, I think. And I have, the pictures of them and whatever. And at the time, I didn't understand all of them. Okay. Fairly new to some of this stuff and I'm still learning, et cetera, et cetera. And I never forgot them completely. I went back and looked at them periodically. And then the other night, um, God does this once in a while. He brings certain things to mind. I just have to go search it out and figure out what it is I'm supposed to find. And so I went looking for the um, call a screenshot, okay, of these prophecies, and I found them. And as I was reading them, all of a sudden I realized that all three of them I understood completely. And so here we are. I thought it would be interesting because they align with what I've been teaching all along. And so these are three different prophecies written in different time periods going all the way back to the 2nd century AD. Okay? So obviously this is called three Jewish prophecies. All right, so here are those prophecies. Okay? We're going to read these first, and then we're going to go and look at some historical data to show where these three different men or rabbis lived. Okay? So, on the eve of the year 5780, the year of the corrections, there will not be a government in Israel for an extended period, and the various camps will quarrel, much without a decision on either side. And then, on Rosh Hashanah itself, they will fight in heaven, the holy side against the side of evil, and God and his entourage will decide between them. And this is all I can say. And from here, I swore not to reveal more secrets and hidden things. Okay? This one is Kaduri in 1979. I get the feeling that this was written long before 1979. They put this up in 1979 probably, but it was probably written earlier in his life. Okay? All right, second one. There will come on the day the two ministers win the government in the land of Israel. Both their names will be Benjamin, and neither of them will succeed in establishing their governments or kingship. On that day, know and understand that the King Messiah already stands at the doorway, and on the Sabbath afterwards he will come and be revealed. Shoshani's statement continues. Understand this and remember it. So this comes from something called the Covenant of the Persimmon, Rabbi Sason Hey Shoshoni. And the third one, the disciples of Rabbi Yossi ben Kisma asked him, when will the Messiah come? And he answered, I fear lest you demand a sign of me that my answer is correct. They assured him, we will demand no sign of you. So he answered them, when this gate falls down, is rebuilt, falls again, and is again rebuilt, and then falls a third time, before it can be rebuilt, the Son of David will come. This is from Sanhedrin Tractate 98a. Okay? So we're going to find out who these guys are and when did they write them. Okay? Rabbi Sason He Shoshoni lived during the 20th century. He was a contemporary of Rabbi Yitzhak Kaduri, okay, 1898 through 2006. And he studied with him in Baghdad before they both moved to Israel. While his exact birth and death dates are not widely documented, his most famous teachings regarding the end of days were recorded by his peers in the mid to late 1900s. The Sanhedrin Tractate of the Babylonian Talmud, which includes Folia 98a, was compiled and redacted between the 4th and 6th century CE. While individual oral traditions date back much earlier, the written text reached its final form in Sasanian Babylonia around 500 CE. Okay? So as you can see, this goes back a ways. Rabbi Yosef ben Kisma lived during the early 2nd century CE in Roman Judea. He was a contemporary of Rabbi Hananiah ben Teradian and lived through the Hadrianic persecutions following the Bar Kokhba revolt. All right, and then one of these was written or part of the original oral Talmud. The other two were written in the early 20th century. What makes these interesting is that all three had to understand who the Messiah actually was and what the Bible was showing about him. That is something that most teachers and preachers today cannot conceive of, because what they say today has no connection with these. Okay? So, what do they represent? And that's the big picture, isn't it? We're going to start with the first one, okay? First one above, Prophecy of Kaduri. So I looked up the year 5780, okay? And that Jewish year corresponds to the year from 2019 to 2020. It leads to a time period when they were trying to take down Netanyahu as the prime minister, right? The government was in turmoil and bickering with each other. Um, Netanyahu himself was under an indictment for fraud and misconduct. This fight went on for a couple of years. Now, eventually, it will lead to the second prophecy that we read, okay? And we'll get to that here in a moment. Now, essentially, the government for Israel, the Knesset, was shut down for quite a while because none of the parties could put together a full cabinet. And they went back and forth and back and forth and arguing and trying to figure out who was going to take over. Okay. Even with elections, and the elections took quite a while before they happened. So I wonder if this particular prophecy refers to a Bible verse that talks about what happens in heaven will also be on earth, and that actually there's some connection there. Okay, but whatever the case, you know, one has to wonder. So something I need to address here on that one, right up front. Um, the Jewish years, 5780, those years have no connection to the beginning of creation, no connection to Noah's Ark, and no connection to any other specific event in history. The time period, the year that they show, I've yet to find out what it connects to because it has no bearing whatsoever on any Bible date. Okay. Um, there might be a connection somewhere to David or possibly Abraham, possibly, but that's it. Okay. So it's almost random in its creation for a start date. Um, for when they started to count it. So we cannot use those dates for any biblical connection of any known kind. So if you follow someone or know someone who uses the Jewish dates to try to come up with answers um, to their time periods, et cetera, you might as well throw the calendar away. Now, mind you, that this will take you back a little ways, um, but it doesn't actually connect to the time periods that they try to break out. It's kind of like saying, the church believes that the creation was only 6,000 years ago, and that somehow this 5780 connects to that, and it does not. You can watch my videos, and I can show you directly from the Bible where the connection is, how old everything is, etc. So just keep that in mind. Those Jewish dates do not connect to anything directly. Okay? So you can't use them in any way. If you want to argue with me on that, you can, email or whatever, and we can talk about it, but or go watch my videos to understand what the Bible says about the actual age of creation of the earth. All right. That said, we move on to the second one. So we have the prophecy of Rabbi Shoshone. Okay. These prophecies, okay, they get clearer as we go. And what's so beautiful about these next two prophecies is that they literally prove out what I have been saying for the last 5 or 6 years. Literally. Better yet, they all interconnect with each other. 3 different time periods, 3 different men, and they all align with each other. All right. So this one talks about a time around 2021 to 2022. Now keep in mind that this was written many years before any of this would have happened. Okay? Um, so if you remember above in the previous prophecy, we were told that there was much upheaval in the government. The ruling Congress, or Knesset, was shut down for an extended period of time because no one could put together a full working cabinet that could get along with each other. Just like the United States, in many ways, they have more parties over there to that work, kind of intermingled with each other. They don't always get along, but there's also a leftist and a rightist and whatever, all part of it over there. Okay. So during this time, an agreement was made where Benjamin Netanyahu and another man named Benny Gantz, I think that's who it was, vied for power. They each agreed to take a period of time and became co-rulers. And by doing so for a period of time, they were able to put together temporary government time periods. Okay? Each for a certain time. Okay? It didn't work, and it again fell apart. But nonetheless, this event is exactly what this prophecy predicted. Okay? Now, here's the interesting part. It says that at the next Sabbath, the Messiah King would appear. So, what does that mean? Well, at the time when I thought about the next Sabbath, I was thinking, oh, well, okay, we're working within the time frame of the 70 years that we're going to talk about here in a moment. And um, they, I was thinking, okay, the next week, okay, things are flying along here. We must have something happening within the next week. Nope. Well, then I thought, okay, well, maybe the next um, feast week. Okay, those are 7-day Sabbaths. All right, so we have um, Passover, Feast of Unleavened Bread. Okay, we have Feast of Weeks, and we have Feast of Tabernacles. Each of those is a 7-day Sabbath week. Okay, and I thought, okay, maybe it'll be something dealing with that. Well, nothing happened. Keep in mind, this was back in 2021, 2022. Okay, so then we have to understand when are the yearly Sabbaths, or the 7-year Sabbaths, if you will. Okay, so let's understand something. Israel became a nation on May 14th of 1948. Okay, they didn't become 1 year old until 1949. So we're starting with 1949. Okay, and we start a count of 70 years. Why 70 years? Um, it has to do with the fig tree prophecy, okay, which we'll see here in a moment. So what's important here is that this is 10 periods, 10 7-year Sabbath year periods, okay? So every 7th year is a special Sabbath year, okay? So if you start and you go through the 70-year period, you have a full 70, you full have that full 70 years, right? You have 10 groups of 7. It's important because it fits into prophecy, okay? All right. So essentially completing the 70-year prophecy in Luke 21, the fig tree prophecy, okay? So Luke 21 talks about the fig tree and all the trees. What is the fig tree? The fig tree represents Jerusalem, okay? It represents Jerusalem getting, at least at that time, part of Jerusalem. And so we've played out that 70-year prophecy. And that 70 years also comes from, because it says a generation, that generation, when they become a nation again, okay, and Israel becomes a nation again, and they have Jerusalem, that the time clock begins, and um, they will see the coming of the tribulation before the generation is completed. Well, that kind of sent me on a different direction slightly here, but um, in the end, what we're looking at here is Psalms 90 verse 10, which tells us a generation 70 years, and then another 10 and a half years plus 3.5 of tribulation. Okay, so what does that mean? So from 1949 until 2019 is 70 years. Now, this whole thing happened in 2021, 2021 to 2022, right? So that doesn't fall into the next 7-year period. So 2019 would have been the last Sabbath, 7-year Sabbath year. Okay? If you add 7 years, we get to 2026. This year ends a 7-year Sabbath year after the 2019 70 years. I'm not meaning to make this complicated. We'll go over this again here a little bit later. Okay? But 2021 and 2022 falls within the years leading up to the next 7th year Sabbath, which is 7 years after 2019, which brings us to 2026. Okay? So I've already done a video about this because that's where I'm looking. May of 2026. It's my watch date. I did that video back in December. Okay? And this aligns perfectly with what I have been looking at. Okay? So it says Yeshua will show himself, but he will not come to the earth. I'm making that clear on my own because in Luke it says he will be in the cloud. He will not be standing on the earth, but he will be in the cloud. Okay? But he will be taking the first fruits, the first 10%, if you will, maybe 144,000. Okay? Um, and so the first fruits will be meeting him there in the clouds. But at that point, he reveals himself, right? All right. Nonetheless, he will be revealing himself at the time and again in 7 more years at the end of the seals period and the second rapture, and then again at the very end of the 7 years of trumpets um, to finish it all out, right? Where he comes back permanently. Okay? Are you ready? Because I am. Been watching. All right. The third prophecy, prophecy of Yossi ben. In case you've never noticed, I had to throw this in here. In case you've never understood that whole Ben word, Yossi ben Kisma, that literally means Yossi, son of Kisma. Kisma was his father's name. So he's Yossi, son of Kisma. Okay? And this represents Tractate 98a. Okay? So, as we can see, each of these prophecies play off the next one. Okay? And each is actually confirmation of things I have been showing for a while now. For years, I have heard people say that Israel is now in the land and will not be taken again. Even the Jews today believe this to be so, and they go against the world, other countries around them, right? Believing that they're basically invincible, that God is going to protect them. And this is what the church teaches us. Okay? Um, Everyone thinks that they are the key players during this time, and they would be wrong. Okay? I've been saying for 4 years at least that they must be removed from the land according to biblical teaching. And others believe that they are Israel and God's chosen people. But the Bible teaches that only those who will accept Christ will be saved, and they don't believe in Christ at this point. Okay? And they won't when this happens until towards the end. So keep that in mind because it's important to what this prophecy is speaking to. So in this prophecy is telling us that Jerusalem will fall 3 times, and before it rises again, the 4th time, the Messiah will return. All right, so that's pretty straightforward. That's literally what it means. So let's understand what we do. So what we know, okay, biblically, what do we know now? Okay, the first time Jerusalem fell was when Nebuchadnezzar, Babylon, came and removed Judah and Benjamin uh, and destroyed the city, right? Took people hostage, took them to other countries. The Bible tells us that this will happen again, okay? Patterns. The second time was 35 years after Jesus' death, right? Everything works in 70 years, 35 years old for Jesus to his death, and then 35 years from there to the fall of Jerusalem. Rome came in again, right? This time, and destroyed the city, dispersing Judah and Benjamin among the nations, just as Israel was dispersed. So no more Israel, Judah, Benjamin, whatever. They're all dispersed amongst the nations. Again, that happened in 70 AD. Now, since then, there hasn't been an Israel or Jerusalem to destroy. On May 14th, 1948, the clock began to tick. Okay? We talked about that above. The clock began to tick. The fig tree story again, right? Jerusalem. There is an Israel as a nation for the first time. Okay? And that started, according to Psalms 90, verse 10, it started the 70-year period from that date. All right. So then, according to Jacob's trouble and a few other places throughout the Bible, but Jacob's trouble is our template here. Okay. Genesis 31:41. There would be 7 easy years before the tribulations, 7 years of seals, 7 years of trumpets, would begin for the last 13 to 14 years. Now, when it's not saying 14 years, it's basically telling us that it's not including the Sabbath years. Okay? All right. Sorry. As we saw above, that last 7th year should be 2026. If the time clock began on May 14th, then we are very close to the end of the easy years. Remember that? We have the 70 years for that time clock. That ended, which started the timeline for Jacob's trouble, which is the 7 easy years. 77 years. Okay? Jerusalem will be removed according to the Bible, but also according to this prophecy. This would make number 3. Okay? This will make number 3. according to that prophecy. So Israel, Jerusalem must be destroyed a third time, and that should happen around May 14th, 2026. Christ will return to take his first fruits bride, but will be in the clouds, and he will return for a time at the end of the 7 years of seals, and remain for 3 more years, then return again at the end of the 7 years of trumpets. And during that first 3 years of trumpets, he will help to rebuild the city and the streets of Jerusalem, but will have to stop because the Antichrist will return the second time and he has to save his people. Okay? It literally says that he takes them to a place of safety where they are fed and taken care of until the tribulation ends. All right, so all of this plays out both in the Bible and according to these prophecies. All right, so each of these prophecies were given by rabbis in 3 different timelines. Keep that in mind. And they're all referring to the same periods of time with the same patterns as we have been showing on this channel now for, well, the channel only started about 3 years ago now, something like that. But I've been showing people for the last 4 years, 4 to 5 years. Okay? So each one of these gives us a piece of the puzzle. Each plays out something that we have already been saying for a few years now. And although I've had these for a few years now, I hadn't understood them completely until I pulled them out the other night. I actually understood them immediately. That was amazing. I think part of it was that I expected to go over the last 5 years because of what I was taught when I started doing this 5 years ago. I was mistaken. Okay? And so I started setting time periods, setting dates. But now I can see these playing out. We now know exactly where we're at and can look up to see it coming. Just as it says in Luke 21, they knew the time, according to Luke 21. They could see it coming. And in fact, the Bible teaches that we have to know the time of his coming. This is not something that's taught in churches. They teach the opposite. But in the Bible, everywhere in the Bible, it teaches that they had to know the time of his coming. And this is what Luke 21 teaches. They could see it coming, it says. God told us in the Bible that we needed to remain awake lest we fall into temptation. Oh, that's an interesting word. That word in the Bible actually refers to the time of seals and the time of the mark. In Luke 21, they could see it coming. So it's amazing how it all comes together. So that word temptation, I do a whole video on that. Basically, it connects to the time of seals period. Okay? For those left behind after the first rapture. It's a time of choosing. You're going to be tempted to take the deal that they're going to give you. People are going to be starving. They're going to have no money. They're going to may not have a place to live, and people will do almost anything to save or protect their families. And so you're going to be tempted to take the mark just to get food. That word temptation is used in when Jesus was on Gethsemane before his death. He talked to the disciples. Do you remember that? And he said to them, remain awake. Do not sleep, lest you be tempted. Lest you be tempted. And that's exactly what he's telling them. The same thing happens in the Lord's Prayer. Again, another video. Again, lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. Those are two different time periods. Temptation is the time of seals, and uh, the time of evil, obviously, is the time of temptation, or the time of trumpets, rather. Got it? All right. So I added a little bit extra onto this. I want to make clear that 77 years, that 70 plus 7 we talked about earlier. So for the last 6 years now, I've been searching for the year all of this takes place, right? And each year for the last 2 years, I started giving watch days. When I finally realized that what I'd been doing, I felt so stupid, okay? Because I've been teaching that there was 7 easy years. But what happened? I believed that it would fall uh, into the 70 years. And somehow we were looking for a way for it to fall within that 70-year period. Reality, it didn't. Okay? So I got to 77, and all of a sudden I'm like, oh, how stupid am I? And I really thought about it and realized that, and I always kind of figured we were in the 7 easy years. I've even stated that several times. But like I said, I always thought it was part of the 70-year period. So here we are in the 77th year, almost to the end of the 77th year. And I really thought about it. And we know that the 77th year ends on May 14th, 2026, which begins the 78th year. And if that's true, then prophecy would falter, wouldn't it? So let's declare it, okay? We know that the prophecy was going to be 70 years, okay? We know that because of the fig tree story, Luke 21. We know that because in Luke 21 it declares this generation will not pass away before all this happens. What happens? What it declares in Luke 21, okay? Psalms 90 verse 10, again, as we've stated before many, many times, Psalms 90 verse 10 declares that a generation is 70 years. That's true throughout the entire Bible, at least the Abraham variation forward. Okay? All right. So 70 years plus 10 and a half years, give or take, plus 3.5 that we find in Revelation 12, um, of tribulation. Okay? We also said above, we also knew that there would be 7 easy years before it started. That connects to Jacob's trouble, Genesis 31:41. Okay? We have 7 easy years, 7 harder years, and 7 really hard years. And that is our template. Always 3 parts, because there are 3 parts to any harvest. Go and look at God's law of the harvest. We have a first fruits, right? Can't take the main harvest until the first fruits are taken and given to God. Okay? At the end of the first fruits week, okay, then we have the harvest. Okay? The main harvest. And then after that, we have the gleaning. And those take place over a period of time. Okay? Now, we are now watching for the end of the 7 easy years to end. In other words, the end of the 70, 2019, plus 7 years to finish. And we also see that, so that's 2026, right? We also see that in the Luke version of the Transfiguration story, where it tells us that he took them up on the mountain about the 8th day or year in prophecy, okay? Just before the 7th ends and the 8th begins. Now, this is different from Matthew and Mark. If you go look at Matthew and Mark, it says about the 7th day. That's just before the 6th year or day ends and the 7th begins. This is different, okay? Because it's Luke, okay? Luke is the pre tribulation bride, the first fruits. So just before the 7th ends and the 8th begins, that will take place on May 14th of 2026. It could be somewhere between the 4th and the 14th. Okay? But we're definitely here. Again, go take a look at what I did in my last video, the last watch date that I did. Okay? And there's more detail there. There's more connections, more patterns that lead us to this time. But these are more of them leading to this time. It's a perfect connection. It's a perfect connection. 70 years, as stated in the Bible, plus 7 easy years, going into the 8th, just before the 8th begins. I do believe we're here, folks. All right? With that said, I would say God bless everyone. I pray that each of you will continue to study and search and definitely keep your eyes up. Keep watching. It's important to know when he's coming, to watch and pray. Luke 21:36, watch and pray that you be worthy to escape all these things that are coming upon you, or upon the earth, rather. It says to escape it all. Is that wrong? No, that's a good thing. Keeping in mind that those who escape, okay, Isaiah 66, towards the last several verses, it tells us that those who escape will return to bring in the harvest of the nations. They will return. Okay? You're not out of this to stay out. You're here to bring in that main harvest, those who are left behind. But that's another 6 to 7 year process. Okay? All right. We'll close this out here. I pray that each of you are well. For those who see this afterwards, I pray that you will understand that the Bible literally is true. All of this comes from the Bible, proving it out to a T. Again, God bless everyone.